wonder what you think. Do you think that rolling dice is essential to tabletop role gaming? Tabletop role gaming? So the past 4 weeks I had about 2,000 visitors or something on my videos and no one subscribed. What the hell? Click the subscribe button if you like what you see. That's all. So welcome back to Vindicast. Today we're going to do a little pokey at a question that sounds simple, but actually cuts straight to the core of what tabletop role-playing is. Or maybe I'm over-exaggerating, but in any case, it's not about gatekeeping, it's not about purity tests, and it's definitely not about telling people they're having fun wrong. No, that's definitely not the case. It's about definitions, expectations, and why people talk past each other so often in this hobby. So let's slow it down and really unpack it. So it's part a game and part storytelling and part social activity. And depending on which side you value most, you'll answer the question very differently. If you come from a board game or a war game background, then dice are the engine and the go-to thing. They're what make it a game. If you come from improv or theater or narrative play, dice can feel like it's just interrupting this flow. It can be the same table and the same activity, but two completely different mental models. And that's why this question keeps coming back and why it never gets resolved. So here's the important thing to keep in mind as we go. This is not about dice, not at all. It's about uncertainty and authority. Whew, it was getting hot in here, so I took off my sweater. Don't worry, it's all I'll take off for the rest of the video. Let's get back to the topic, shall we? Okay, so let's start with the more rigid position. The people who say if you're not rolling, you're not gaming. And at first glance, that may sound a bit harsh. And I agree that it sounds a little bit harsh, but hear me out. There are a few very solid arguments coming from this group. Because dice, they do three very crucial things that are needed in a tabletop role-playing game. And the first one is they create uncertainty. And because they create uncertainty, they create stakes, where failure is real and where success is earned. And then thirdly, they remove personal bias, meaning the system decides, not really you. And this is like the baseline of many games out there. For these players, dice are what make choices meaningful. If outcomes are negotiated, if failure is avoided because it feels bad, or if success is granted because it fits the story, then from their perspective, you're not playing a game anymore. You're just agreeing on outcomes. And to them, that's not gaming. If you lean this way, does the game lose tension for you when roles disappear? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, click the subscribe button. Now let's flip the table. There's another group out there in the wild that hears all that and will say, no, that is nonsense. That is not what makes a game. And their argument is also quite okay. I mean, it goes like this. A game is about meaningful decisions. I think we can all agree that it's not specifically math that makes a game. So if the fiction is clear, and if the choices have consequences, and if the table is invested, then uncertainty can still exist, even without rolling dice. So they'll point out that dice can even flatten the emotion, and random failure can feel very stupid, and constant rolling can break immersion. And for these players, rolling isn't what creates tension at all. They think that context does it. And if everyone at the table agrees how a situation should resolve, rolling can feel a bit redundant. So, yeah, from their perspective, you're absolutely still gaming, just without the dice. So let's go a bit deeper about the distinction that I think a lot of people in the community are missing. And when they get messy in their discussions online and when they're arguing and fighting over this stuff, I think they're usually arguing about something that isn't the crucial factor. I mean, they're not really talking about the dividing line between the two parties. I think the distinction is how are outcomes decided, and people don't really discuss that. Or maybe they do and they just don't agree, but that's just preference at that point. Because it doesn't really matter what tool you use, but whether a procedure exists that everyone trusts. Because I think this is the key point. Dice are very common, but they are not mandatory. What is mandatory is if you want to call something a game, that you need a resolution process that says, no, you can't do that. Or by doing this, yes, you can do that. If outcomes are determined by a system, like a table, a clock, a deck of cards, whatever, some kind of a ruling framework, then you're gaming. But if outcomes are completely determined by preference, negotiation, or very often becomes like a focus group and whoever speaks loudest, then I don't think you're gaming. And please don't shoot me by saying that. It's still okay that you do that. If you're having fun, by all means, continue. But I don't think you're still gaming. It's just different. So at this point, you may be thinking, why even have this conversation? I mean, people are always going to argue about this or about something else. Rules people will call story people just unserious actors, and story people will call rules people pedantic. And online, this usually ends with someone telling someone else that they're doing it wrong. So why bother talking about it? But I do think that it's worth talking about anyway, because most of these arguments aren't actually about being right or wrong. They're about unspoken expectations. Most tables don't blow up because someone likes rules or someone likes freedom. They blow up because nobody said out loud what they were relying on, because they weren't in sync. People sit down thinking they're playing the same game when they're not, and that's where friction exists. If one person thinks that the dice will decide, while someone else at the table thinks that it's more about opinion and story first, and someone else thinks, well, that is the GM is the only arbiter. Well, nobody realizes this until something important is on the line. And yeah, at that point, it's already pretty emotional and it's already personal. And now it feels like someone is kind of cheating the game, even if nobody actually did. Talking about this upfront doesn't stop disagreement, but it moves it earlier, when it's cheaper and kinder, and it turns that felt unfair into, okay, so that's how you resolve things. And that's such a big difference because, yeah, another reason why this matters is that language gives people permission. A lot of players and GMs that walk away from games feeling frustrated but unable to explain why. They say just it didn't click. The vibe was off, or I guess it's not really for me. But maybe what they're feeling is, because they can't really put it into words, maybe what they're feeling is, I kind of trusted the system, but then suddenly they didn't really have that system in place and it kind of disappeared. Or I trusted the table to play in a certain way, but then suddenly the rules kicked in and overruled us. And I think when we can name that, maybe not everyone, of course, but maybe some people will stop blaming themselves or each other. They will realize, oh, this isn't about skill, it's about how you align with each other. And finally, I think it matters because it protects the hobby from becoming shallow. If we pretend all play is identical, then we lose the ability to talk about design, about intent, about your experiences. We can't ask, what is this game trying to do? What does this system reward? What kind of tension does it create? We reduce everything to flat taste. And taste is fine, of course, but taste alone doesn't build understanding. So yeah, people will still argue. That's inevitable. But even if a few tables After having this conversation, before the dice hit the table, talk about this, then that's few bad nights, fewer quiet resentments, fewer people walking away from something they might have loved in the right context. And honestly, that's reason enough for me to talk about it. So I think a clean way to put this, a clean way to frame this, is that a tabletop role playing game lives at some kind of a weird intersection between role play and system procedure and uncertainty. Remove role play and you're just playing a board game. Remove procedure and you're just telling a story. Remove uncertainty and there is no longer any stakes. Dice are one way to preserve that balance, and we just have to admit that they may not be the only way to preserve that balance. They are a very effective one, though. So I'll leave you with this. When you're at the table, what makes it feel like a game to you? Is it the dice? Is it the rules? The risk? Is the people around you? The shared understanding of how outcomes are decided? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Another really, really good one to talk about, I think. I'm really curious what you can come up with. This is just one of those questions, where the answers say a lot about how people experience the hobby. So I'm very curious about that. And this wasn't about drawing a hard line, it was about creating some clarity, maybe. So you can roleplay without gaming, you can game without heavy roleplay, but when you bring people together at a table, it helps to know what everyone thinks they showed up to do. So I leave you with that. Thank you very much for listening. This was Vindicast, and I'll see you next time. Bye.